Here I am, unemployed, unimportant, and there you are, wealthy, powerful, you own property, gold, art, wine and human souls in massive, sickening criminal quantities. How do you sleep at night?
I sleep at night between silk sheets on a heated king-size auto-massage waterbed with piped music in a very quiet street, with a companion whose beauty would make you weep with desire. It is not so long since slavery was defended as necessary for economic progress. To denounce slavery was regarded as an attack on the very heart of free enterprise. This line of argument has a chilling similarity to our present day. The proposal to replace income and indirect taxes with a tax on land values is likewise accused of being an attack on capitalism itself. How is it that so many classical economists and thinkers, people like Adam Smith, David Ricardo and John Stuart Mill, all saw the special nature of land and its rent? It was George Bernard Shaw who said, "The land question is so fundamental that if we go wrong on it, everything else will go wrong automatically." If the fundamentals are right, why does so much go wrong? Ask yourself some questions. Why are poverty and urban problems increasing? Why does unemployment seem insoluble? Why is housing increasingly unattainable for many? Why are we burdened with more and more direct and indirect taxes? Why are honest, efficient businesses finding it so hard? Why are wages being squeezed to the limit? Why is our standard of living falling? Why does our economy seem to be on the edge of a precipice? Why all this if the fundamentals are so right?
Parcel of this size in Toorak is highly coveted. Just about round 26,000 feet. I wouldn't dare put an exact square footage because the block is a very hard one to measure and I'm no trigonometry student. But there's around about 26,000 feet. We feel there might be in excess, if anything. 26,000 square feet on a beautiful elevated site. We have approved plans for a mansion home. There's a sketch of that on the front board there, a magnificent mansion home that might even rival Peter Gibson's house in Hopeton Road, could be erected here.
Between 1987 and 89, there was a 150% increase in the proportion of dwellings that were purchased by investors. In the same period, there was an equivalent decline in the proportion of dwellings purchased by first home buyers.
And there are other alternatives that you could turn your mind to too. Perhaps a very, very exclusive retirement village where you could accommodate older people, yet have medical facilities for them. You could turn your mind to that as well. Of course, no doubt, you've all made...
Failure to differentiate between land and other forms of wealth-producing property has been and is the fundamental error in economic or political thought.
Another point that I'd like to make is, you've been following the paper recently about sales that have been achieved in suburbs other than Toorak, the likes of in Hawthorne, Camberwell, Balwyn, and other suburbs on the fringe of Toorak, South Yarra obviously. It's my opinion, if you do your sums, that Toorak itself, both in
See how this evil process strikes at every form of industrial activity. All comes back to the land value, and its owner, for the time being, is able to levy his toll upon all other forms of wealth and upon every form of industry.
But in 12 months' time, you look back on your purchase with a degree of pride because you've read the market very, very well indeed. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're offering you this afternoon, a magnificent elevated block of land right in the heart of Toorak, versatile property, any amount of things that you can do with it. Quite enough from me. You've done all your sums and you've come here to buy it today. Who's going to start me off? Don't mind where we start. Vendors want to sell this today under the hammer. Kick me off anywhere you like. $2 million? $2 million. Thank you, sir. A $2 million bid. At $2 million I have, and I'll take raises of $100,000. At $2 million, that'd be a wonderful buy, wouldn't it? But at $2 million is all I'm bidding. I'm taking $100,000 anywhere you like at all. At $2 million got now. At 2.1. At 2.1. Against you behind 2.3. 2.2, sorry. 2.2. At 2.2 there. At 2.2.
It is possible to have societies, and we've seen it in other countries, where the wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, and it's very hard for people at the bottom end of the income scale or the wealth scale to break through. But in a free society like ours, where everybody is able to participate in the processes of the society, with some, of course, few exceptions, but where people are free and where there's an operating market system, and where we've got government which has got redistributive policies to help those who can't share in the benefits of the market in the short term or the longer term, then of course wealth can and does move right through the society. There are, of course, greater concentrations of wealth in some people and some hands than others, but over time what we find is that there are opportunities for all to share in that, and so our society as a whole has become a much wealthier society. It hasn't been confined just to the few.
In the days of the landlords, the warlords, they went by all sorts of different names depending on the society, whether it was feudal or whatever. They were people who acquired by a variety of means, sometimes not too legitimate. I mean, a lot of wealth, a lot of land, for example, in the 19th century was acquired as a result of wars, of plundering, of theft, of pilfering, and many of the biggest pilferers and thieves became, knights of the realm, or became, parts of the establishment in the United States or lots of other different countries. And so, to some extent, I guess the so-called entrepreneurs of today, the captains of industry, the corporate power brokers of today, are very much like those people. They don't go to war in the sense of sending their armed forces out to conquer distant fields or to colonise, but I mean, the finance directors, the stock market people, I mean, they are soldiers of fortune who go out and plunder other people's property. I mean, what's the difference between sending your army out to pinch somebody's field and sending your army of stockbrokers out to pinch somebody's stocks and shares, which, of course, in today's industrialised society is just a field. It's a playing field where people operate, where fortunes are made and lost. So the similarities, I think, are more so than the differences. The methods are a bit different, or seem to be different. The end result is that a relatively few people in ours and many other societies acquire control over most of the wealth, whilst the vast majority, 90% of the population, just have the scraps, which amounts to about 20% of the wealth.
The theory of land value taxation was articulated and popularised by the American economist Henry George. His eloquent arguments for tax reform, free trade and the abolition of poverty were revolutionary ideas for revolutionary times. They grew out of the ferment of the Industrial Revolution that in the 19th century saw the death of the old world and the birth of the new. Transformed from agricultural to urban societies, the juxtaposition of wealth and poverty had never seemed more extreme. Born in Philadelphia in 1839, Henry George was nurtured in a very religious home, and his faith remained a driving force for the rest of his life. At the age of 30, he moved to New York, where he was horrified by the poverty he saw. From that time on, he vowed to find an answer to the problem of, as he put it, the increase of want with the increase of wealth. The fruit of his search was to write Progress and Poverty, published in 1879, at a time of economic crisis and industrial strife. The book received a sensational response, selling millions of copies across America, England, Europe, Russia and China. It is said to be the all-time bestseller on economics. progress and poverty won Henry George instant fame, and he was invited to conduct lecture tours all around the world. He came to Australia in 1890 and was enthusiastically received wherever he spoke, in both city and rural areas. The ideas of Henry George are revolutionary, but have little in common with Marxism, which, as the 20th century has borne out, often seems to endanger the liberties of humankind. There is no place for violent revolution in the Georgist philosophy. It is not Marxist, yet it is indeed revolutionary. This is why it is sometimes called the Third Way. The great 19th century Russian writer Leo Tolstoy said of Henry George's ideas, "People do not argue with the teaching of George, they simply do not know it. The teaching of George is irresistibly convincing in its simplicity and clearness. He who becomes acquainted with it cannot but agree." The present century has been marked by a prodigious increase in wealth-producing power. At the beginning of this marvelous era, it was natural to expect, and it was expected, that labour-saving inventions would lighten the toil and improve the conditions of the labourer, that the enormous increase in the power of producing wealth would make real poverty a thing of the past. Now, however, we are coming into collision with facts which there can be no mistaking. In the United States, it is clear that squalor and misery and the vices and crimes that spring from them everywhere increase as the village grows to the city, and the march of development brings the advantages of the improved methods of production and exchange. This association of poverty with progress is the great enigma of our times. It is the central fact from which spring industrial, social, and political difficulties that perplex the world, and with which statesmanship and philanthropy and education grapple in vain. It is the riddle which the Sphinx of Fate puts to our civilization, and which not to answer is to be destroyed. Land value taxation is now also known as site rent. What essentially is the theory? It is based on the idea that land values, which are due to natural and social processes, should be the main source of all public revenue, therefore minimising taxes on labour, thrift and industry. Henry George begins his analysis with the premise that poverty is not caused by any lack of productive power, either of people or of nature. Rather, he focuses on the economic laws of distribution. There are three factors in the production of wealth: land, including all natural resources; labour, that is the contribution of people to production; and capital, which includes all the means of production that are created by people, including tools, equipment, and so on. All three factors of production operate in the market to produce wealth. It is crucial to avoid the error that most economic analysis falls into, of not differentiating sufficiently between land and capital. Of the three factors of production, it is land that differs in several fundamental ways from both labour and capital. Firstly, its supply is inelastic. Secondly, it is just there, it is not produced. And thirdly, its value is increased not just by demand, but by the unearned increment due to public expenditure on public works.
People should have to pay site rent because the value given to land principally arises from community expenditure and community action in promoting population growth and development and rezoning land and all the rest of it. That's where the value of land comes from, not anything that the individual does.
Adherents of a land value tax would claim that it's not actually a tax. It's a rent on our natural resources, a site rent on our natural resources. And insofar as it is so, it's distinguished from a tax because a tax is actually taking from wealth that's created by individuals.
95% of all taxes at the moment are paid by employers and employees on their effort and enterprise and hard work. Although ground rent contributes about a third of the total national income, it pays only about 5% of all taxation. And if we could reduce the taxes on the workers and on the enterprising employer and put it on the fortunate monopoly owner of land, we would all benefit, because it is the men who produce and take risks that are the salt of the earth, not the people who borrow money to buy land and speculate in land.
Land monopoly is not the only monopoly which exists, but it is by far the greatest of all monopolies. It is a perpetual monopoly, and it is the mother of all other forms of monopoly. It does not matter where you look or what examples you select. You will see that every form of enterprise, every step in material progress, is undertaken only after the land monopolist has skimmed the cream off for himself. And everywhere today, the man who wishes to put land to the highest use is forced to pay a preliminary fine to the man who is putting it to an inferior use, or no use at all. All comes back to the land value.
This brings us to the classical theory of pure economic rent. The income earned by a factor of production whose supply is perfectly inelastic is called pure economic rent. The classic example of such a factor is land, remembering that by land we include all natural resources. Pure economic rent should not be confused with what is loosely called the rental income earned by assets whose supply is not inelastic. The pure economic rent of land is that component of income to the landowner that is surplus to all costs and normal profit. In our distorted and speculative environment, the surplus component, or pure economic rent of land, is enormous. It was J.S. Mill who first said that this economic rent should be taxed away. Henry George popularised the idea, arguing that this unearned income in land value, being due to natural and social processes, should be distributed to the whole community. This, he said, would be the only way of avoiding the distortions and burdens caused by income and other taxes, the only way to prevent poverty and promote liberty. Proponents of the Georgist philosophy argue that such lofty goals can only be achieved in two ways, and that the choice should be clear. We can either nationalise land through revolution, or choose the peaceful, democratic means of the land value tax.
There is a sense in which the whole debate about our current economic situation is quite the wrong way about. Instead of taxing people who want to be productive, we should be taxing away those elements of society that wish to speculate in our natural resources, and that's why we'd advocate the application of a site rent. Not only the application of a site rent, but of course the removal of taxes from people who wish to be productive. It's not we're attacking dole bludgers, where other sides of the political spectrum are attacking people like Bond, Skase and Elliott, but they're only doing what the tax system encourages them to do. It channels them towards being non-productive or into speculative takeovers where they get the tax advantages. However, if we tax natural resources, site rents, we would find that people would be channelled back into producing.
Well, I think one of the most important changes that needs to take place is to tax debt rather than equity. You see, one of the reasons why it's it's very destructive, but at the same time attractive for these big corporations to rush out and make extravagant takeover bids on other companies, is because their debt is a tax deduction. And so, okay, they can go in heavily into debt, they don't pay any tax on it. Whereas if you want to invest some money, put some equity into a company to create things, to produce things which we can export or which will help to generate more wealth, then you're taxed. And so it's upside down.
The simple fact of the matter is, if you tax production, you won't have production. If you tax speculation, you won't have speculation. So at the moment we've got unemployment because we tax employment. We've got lack of production because we tax production. And we've got massive speculation because there's all but no taxes on speculative activity.
We haven't been able to extirpate inflation, and people have got into the frame of mind where they think that the way to become well off is to allow inflation to either erode the real value of debt or to increase the value of assets and then sell those assets at an inflated price. Now, that's not a healthy thing for a country, and that's the responsibility in part of government, part the responsibility of other sections of the community to make sure that we get rid of inflation, which is the main incentive to engage in that, and to reform the tax system in a way which does not reward those people who go into debt against those who invest.
The conflict between labour and capital is a myth. It's a bit of a sideshow, really, but both parts cooperate in the economic process, and sure, we have fights between unionists and we have fights between the corporate bosses, but really the fact that neither of them are getting their fair share of the national cake is really a function of the fact that there are those who are taking their share almost unnoticed, and that's people who actually take our site rents. We have some taxes on those at a local government level. We have capital gains taxes, but it's estimated that some 25% of our national income is probably site rent, community-created site rent, that is being lost to us.
If there are such benefits to be had for boss and worker alike, then why has this reform not yet been implemented?
Kingston Heritage 2 each way.
Kingston Heritage is 24 to 2 each way, 966. High Bailiff.
2 each way.
High Bailiff 6 to 2 each way is number 967.
Three main factors are at work in opposing the land value tax. Firstly, the propertied elites will of course fight it tooth and nail. Secondly, because of the distorted tax regime, land speculation has become the main form of saving by the middle classes. And thirdly, with apologies to Abraham Lincoln, it does seem that politics is the art of fooling most of the people all of the time.
The economic strategy is bearing fruit. Australia is turning the corner, but there is still, by any judgment, a long haul ahead of us. And no feat of imagination will take that fact away.
No matter who is in power, both sides of politics contribute to and prop up an environment of hegemony. Hegemony is described in the Fontana Dictionary of Modern Thought as being political and economic control exercised by a dominant class and its success in projecting its own particular way of seeing the world, human and social relationships, so that this is accepted as common sense and part of the natural order by those who are in fact subordinated to it.
In the long run, I would hope that a site value levy would raise enough revenue to finance all the needs of government, and that would ipso facto lead to the elimination of all other taxes.
But you could say the same about anything. If income was taxed properly, well then you could eliminate most injustice and many of the inequities in our society. So I think it's a rather simplistic view to say, well, look, if you have a land tax applied properly, then that'll fix everything up.
The current problems besetting us economically in Australia are quite capable of remedy. In fact, we don't just talk from theory. In Denmark in the late 50s, the Justice Party formed a coalition, and they got elected on the platform of a land value tax. And even before they were elected, when it looked like they were going to get in, speculation in property values dropped. When they got into power and some of their policies started to be implemented, inflation dropped overnight, unemployment practically fell to zero, high interest rates were reduced, and the only thing that I understand or recollect got them out was that the landlord lobby started to say to people, well, look, your land prices are going down.
I mean, it's, in my view, it would involve a very complex and easy to manipulate system which would finish up, in fact, undermining its intention.
The whole history of local government has been mainly one of raising revenue from the site value of land, and it's been proved. The valuations are very, very simple. These days we've got land data in Melbourne, and I believe in other states computerised valuation methods will make it very, very simple indeed to ascertain the site value of land, and you just simply press a button and lo and behold you can easily work out the site rental on that land. It's very, very economical to collect. Best of all taxes.
Well, I think you'd have to say that we are surely not at the end of the period of tax reform, because the tax system is not operating effectively in many respects. There is unfortunately a tendency for tax reform to occur in a very piecemeal and ad hoc way, and we end up with a rather messy system of taxation. And undoubtedly, whichever party is in power, there's going to be further examination of the desirability of introducing a tax which has the character really much more of a general law which applies to all, as distinct from a tax system which is made up of a myriad of different kinds of taxes for different sections of the community, and which distort private decision-making in ways which are simply not helpful for the economic growth and development of the country.
Consumption tax is not the way out. If we could only make that quantum leap and realise that there's a tax just waiting for us, and that's a tax on site rents, that would offer a ray of hope.
All things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, God made them high or lowly and ordered their estate. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, our Lord God made them all.
In the 90s, we are faced with a growing gap between rich and poor. Progress with poverty still haunts us. It takes courage to believe there are solutions. As we said earlier, it is not so long ago that slavery was defended as vital to economic progress. The same groups in society who then thought that they had the unquestionable right to own and control other human beings still believe today they have the same rights of abuse over the land. The push for land value taxation is not about hatred or violent revolution, but it is a fundamental structural change that must be achieved if we want prosperity and peace. In our time, as in times before, creep on the insidious forces that in producing inequality destroy liberty. On the horizon, the clouds begin to lower. Liberty calls to us again. It is not enough that men should vote. It is not enough that they should be theoretically equal before the law. They must have liberty to avail themselves of the opportunities and means of life. They must stand on equal terms with reference to the bounty of nature. This is the universal law. It is the lesson of the centuries. Unless its foundations be laid in justice, the social structure cannot stand.